Well, good evening. I'd like to call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting for the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome everyone in the Council chambers this evening. Our first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so. You can do so now or when it arises on the agenda. Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under the General Government 5.2.3 Staff Report Surplus Land Decision, my daughter-in-law is a partner in the group that's interested in the purchase of that stated property.
Thank you. That's been noted. No further. The next item then is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we have nothing under that this evening. We have one delegation. The delegation this evening is Mr. Gerald Beach. He's here about the Saugeen Valley's policy of no hunting. Welcome, Gerald. And if you just want to come to the mic there and push there's a little blue button so everybody can. Just over here. I think it's blue over. Yeah, it is.
Can everyone hear me now? Okay, that's good. I'm Gerald Beach. I'm 70 years old. I've been around for quite a while. I graduated from Agriculture College. I farmed next to the Bluffs. They were good neighbors. For 9 years, I looked after the water treatment plant in Paisley while I was farming and working for Ontario Dairy Herd Improvement at the same time. 12 years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, so I've been very active since. I'm not going to give up yet. I would say that the Saugeen Bluffs was an inspiration, backyard, and a playground. Now they tell me I'm a safety hazard because of hunting. I'm going to cut this a little short, but what my main goal tonight is to draw to people's attention. I don't think Saugeen Shores is getting enough reward for what they put into it. How much money, I wonder, do they really generate the Saugeen Bluffs? I know my main support comes from funding from Saugeen Shores. I would like to get some figures on that sometime. I think people would be interested in that. I would like to see in the future recorded votes on any issues regarding hunting. In the Conservation Authority Act, it says, given that most of Saugeen Valley's funding comes from the municipal level, then municipalities should be given decision-making responsibilities. What else do we have here? Mike and Luke, you're doing a good job. The only problem with Luke is he don't get a vote on issues because he's chairman. I think you're losing out on that. Somehow, could we get around to getting another person in there? At least two people that can vote. And it's nothing against you, Luke. You're doing a fine job. Hunting is the issue. We've always had hunting there until this past year. Signs went up, absolutely no hunting or something to that effect. I think that's wrong. Hunting is a heritage thing we should follow up on. And that's where I am getting a little nervous up here, shaking a bit for some reason. I would like to end it there, but I would like to make it very clear that I would like to see archery hunting there. I would like to see it on some of their other areas too. They're concerned about noise. Well, there's no noise with the bow, and safety. There's nothing more safer than bows and arrows versus guns and stuff like that. Thank you.
Okay, just before you go, there may be a question for clarification, Jared. Any questions from Councillor Dave Mayette?
Sure.
The blue button, Dave.
The blue button I got and the red light.
Go ahead.
I'm glad you came. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Gerald, thank you very much for coming, bringing and highlighting this issue. Probably not a lot of people are aware of this change. It kind of happened. Certainly, I never became aware of it until you brought it to my attention a little while ago. I have also, I sympathize with you and I support your position. I have hunted there, maybe with you or in the same neighborhood as you were in. I'm not sure, but I've hunted Saugeen Bluffs, and it's a wonderful site, and it was actually a site of the Bruce Heritage Project this year, which speaks to the heritage that you're referring to. It's part of the filming was conducted down in the Bluffs, and
I actually contributed a lot of the costumes they wore.
Did you?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Yeah, that's right. So I might have worn one of them.
Have I walked in your shoes before?
Perhaps. I don't think I'd fit in your shoes, though. But anyways, I support the position, and I would like to have the issue brought back to Saugeen Conservation Authority for reconsideration. And I'm understanding from our conversation and from what you've just said is that it would be satisfactory to you, and hopefully to the rest of the hunting community, that hunting be restricted to the use of primitive bow and arrow as opposed to guns and muzzle loaders. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, that's correct. What we should have is people being made more aware of what's actually going on. You talk to somebody, well, I didn't know that. Well, we need a better system of getting the news out there to media. Folks, yes.
Well, like I say, I'm glad you pointed that out. And there's a lot of areas, not so many in Saugeen Shores, that are public land available for hunting. In fact, the numbers of spots are quite few and far between. There's only a couple that I know of. But across the Bruce County, and Grey County, there are a number of areas, and there's downward pressure on those areas. People are new to the area. Perhaps we have an influx of urban people, and the attitudes are changing. But people need to realize that this is a heritage sport that's been taking place for generations and generations, and it's something that the people that participate in it are very passionate about, myself included, and it needs to be highlighted, because hunters by very nature are a stealthy bunch. We don't put up banners and signs and parades and things when we're going into the bush. You do so under stealthy conditions, because that leads to success in hunting. So I appreciate the fact that you've highlighted this issue, and I will support you in any way I can. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
One more, Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I too appreciate you coming and speaking, and I don't know if you can answer it or whether Luke or the mayor can answer it, but was this a staff decision or was this a board decision?
Board decision, I believe. Is that correct? Prior to the board's decision, they had 4 delegates get together and get a presentation ready, and the vote was 3-1 to go back to the way it was. There's a saying out there, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's what their general consensus was.
So I'm not a hunter, and I appreciate everything that hunters do to keep this part of Ontario in check, if you wish. And having had two serious accidents with deer collisions in my vehicles, and I understand the need to keep the herd thinned out as well, and in particular the deer, let alone all the other things that you could be hunting as well. So my hope is that we can understand more about the process on how those kinds of decisions are made, and why the public at large isn't involved in feedback, if they were or weren't, because obviously we're getting feedback now, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
The word consultation, I believe, is we have to work together on this issue and make it work. Thank you.
Just hang on again. We get one more. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Gerald. You and I have talked about this a few times, and I guess just for a little context, the Conservation Authority, as everyone will know, recently converted Saugeen Bluffs to a horse camp, and when it did that, it extended the camping activities out into the entire property, where it used to be confined to just a small part of the property. Now horses and people, therefore, are traveling across the whole property. That happened in 2016. At that time, as a result of that, the authority decided where hunting had been permitted during certain months to ban hunting altogether as a result of the increased activity on the property. Mr. Beach then approached myself and some others on the authority, as well as the general manager of the authority, and at that time and said, can we revisit that decision? And so that led to another discussion and some further consultation with SVCA staff and with the authority itself. SVCA staff, in fact, recommended to return to hunting, to have hunting back on the property. They felt it might be a good idea to have hunters on the property in the winter months in order to get a look at the property, and keep an eye on how it was going, and it felt that the conflicts might not be that bad since the horse use is not that significant in the winter months. It was then discussed at a committee, which I am a member, and the committee voted on that and recommended to the authority that hunting be reinstated. The discussion at the authority ended up where these discussions often end up on bodies like this with a question of liability and concern about, as Mr. Beach correctly pointed out, noise as well as with spooking horses and the danger with regard to hunting and the fear of those conflicts and the unwillingness to run that risk. And so the authority turned down the committee's recommendation and chose to maintain the status quo, which is no hunting. I'm sure the mayor and I are quite willing to take this council's direction back to the authority to revisit if archery is something that council is interested in seeing the authority take a look at. We can, but to be clear, the authority has reviewed this 2 times and 2 times has decided that hunting should not be permitted on the property, and by fairly healthy margins when those votes were taken. And of course, it's important to point out, and Dave, Councillor Mayette noted in his comment that hunting is under pressure and that there's a lot of area where hunting is allowed on public lands, but maybe that's on the downward slope. Just to note, the Conservation Authority provides hunting on 18,000 acres of land in the watershed, and there is no downward pressure on any of it, but unfortunately at Saugeen Bluffs as a result of some of the conflicting uses that I noted. So we'll be, but if this council would like us to revisit it, we'll certainly bring that back to the authority and make that desire known. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Luke. The word I was searching for prior to this was compromise. I think archery would be a good compromise to what they're suggesting. Thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Luke. Deputy Mayor makes some equally good and interesting points of process and our availability to input to it, and I think we should. And I think we should look for those opportunities when we know that the horses and the camping with the horses is at a low, and see if it feathers in and meets with hunting seasons, and maybe we could ask them to take an approach that says there's an opportunity for a couple of weeks at a prime time when there wouldn't be any horses there, so that they could blend both at the same time. Thank you, and I would like to know how we're going to do that.
Okay, that's the end of our delegations. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I'd just like to take advantage of the opportunity to ask the Deputy Mayor for a comment about how the horse camping has turned the tide at the Bluffs, because in the time that I sat as our representative there, that was costing the authority money, and so there was an attempt to turn things around there so that it became not necessarily a big profit maker, but certainly a much more viable operation. Could you maybe just take this opportunity to make a comment about what's happening? Briefly,
I think this is really outside the scope of this delegation, so if you want to speak to it very briefly, Luke, please go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I would just say extremely well. All the Bluffs campgrounds, or all the campgrounds, are performing extremely well. Nearly $100,000 in profit this year on the authority's campgrounds.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda then is the General Government Staff Report, and it has to do with our 2018 budget. And our Chief Financial Officer, I believe, Sue Murray, is going to give us the good news.
Thank you. I presented to you the 2008 proposed municipal budget. I would like to remind everyone that there were 2 meetings held in December for the capital and operating budgets. And I'd like to take this time also to thank the staff. I've only been here for a couple months, so I just wanted to thank them for their support over the last couple months as I've delved into the budget. So all of the recommendations from those previous 2 meetings have been taken into account and have been adjusted in the budget. There are a couple of other changes and additions to the budget. I felt that this budget was was a reasonable budget, and it has a significant investment into infrastructure, which will help achieve the town's strategic objectives that you've set. There is a recommendation to have a blended tax rate of 3%. So this has resulted in the major changes to have a transfer to a future capital reserve of $725,000 approximately. Along with that, staff will be developing a long-range financial plan and reserve strategy to assist council in achieving future significant projects as directed and help us address the infrastructure deficit where it is likely a new reserve will be created for these contributions. One of the key assumptions in the budget also was that Bruce County had passed a bylaw estimating that their levy would increase 3.27%. I heard on Friday from Betty Ann at the county that they have putting their bylaw, I believe it could be tonight or this week. So our levy is estimated to be about $18,000 less than what was in the estimated for the capital budget and the 3%. So the budget as presented will be very close to actual numbers.
Thank you very much. So I guess we'll entertain any questions or comments to the budget. So I better read the recommendation, then we'll do that. The recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Saugeen Shores approves the municipal budget for the year 2018 as follows. It's expenditures for operating and reserves of $27,671,879. Expenditures on capital will be $16,297,500 for a total 2018 budget of $43,969,379. That's based on revenues for operating reserves of $15,148,813. For capital will be $14,765,053 for a total 2000 operating reserves budget of $29,913,866. This will be total municipal taxation for operating reserves of $12,523,066. For capital, $1,532,447 for a total 2018 budget of $14,055,513. Further, that the Town of Saugeen Shores tax levy be set to a combined blended tax rate increase of 3% to allow the Town of Saugeen Shores to increase the transfer to the future capital reserves to help alleviate or avoid debt financing on future capital projects. This represents a $90.50 increase to the average household assessed at $282,000. That the BIA levies for 2018 be set at $33,000 for the Port Elgin BIA and $29,350 for the Southampton BIA. That the tax levy bylaw establishing the 2018 tax rates be considered by council at a future date. So, questions for this? Comments? Get your hand up. I'm going to call the question here. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just ask that once a decision is made here that we, it's the last term of this council, and I think it would be appropriate to have members of council have an opportunity to comment on the budget process. Certainly a couple of us have had a few terms of council to see different timelines and that sort of thing, but we have 9 people who've been part of a process that has led to a budget coming before council early in the new year, which is good timing for budgets, but it certainly does compress some of the activity associated with council involvement with it. So I would just ask that there be an effort made to get some comments from all of us as to how we felt we were able to participate in the process, and just some sort of a sense of how it worked for us, because we now have 9 councillors who've been part of a 4-year experience. I am disappointed in the budget in the sense that there isn't any obvious expenditure on the capital side this time around that would see some installations or some very definite upgrades to playground equipment. So I would just like to just flag that as an area that I think we've missed in terms of the mix of things that are here. So hopefully there might be some opportunities during the year to take a look at one or two playground areas and find ways to either in a small way or a bigger way put an injection of energy or enthusiasm into those opportunities. There's more kids in this town every time you look around, and certainly, there's some obvious expenditures related to sports areas and recreational areas, but not specific to playground stuff. So I'll just comment that I'm disappointed that didn't make the cut this year, and hope that that gets picked up in other ways whenever we can find a place for it. But I would ask that we get a chance to comment on how we feel the process works from our perspective. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I recognize that many of our staff are new to their positions, and I really appreciate the efforts that are going into these reports and budgets, and thank you, Sue, for your efforts as well. And I have nothing to gain by supposedly nothing to gain by saying I'm impressed with the angle that we're taking that says that avoiding debt financing is an important issue for the community and for the younger part of the community going forward, that these smaller increases, and they are, I mean, we're talking about something year over year, 4 years, less than $1 a week for the average home for municipal taxation. So this is incredibly opportunistic and provides for the future, and I appreciate it and will support it. Thank you.
Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I too will be supporting this budget going forward, but it wasn't without at least some serious consideration and perhaps even a little bit of reservation, but I believe it's the right thing to do. As Councillor Minaj alluded to, there's opportunities here for us to take advantage of the times in which we're living, and this town is going through, as anybody who lives here and drives around can see, a tremendous growth and expansion, and the number of new tax rolls and the development fees that we're able to capitalize on because of that growth is putting us in an enviable situation that many municipalities, I believe, would rather be in, whereby our overall increase in requirements is not as much as we have the opportunity to take, so, or to raise the tax levy, and to do it in such a way that we're able to put those money into the reserves, which is where a majority of that 3% is going to, is my belief, so that when we do get down the road, and it'll be certainly beyond the term of this council, but when we get down the road and we have an opportunity to invest in the community and invest in some of those infrastructures that will lead to further growth, recreation facilities, parks, playgrounds, beach facilities, it'll pay off in spades. So I'm convinced that what we're doing here is the right thing, and if we continue down this path, this will be a great community for decades to come. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Mr. Mayor, first just like to say thank you. Echo Councillor Minaj's comments to the staff, all the Director of Finance and all the department heads and all of their staffs below them and the CAO for your hard work on this budget. It's always hard work, and you've done a fine job. I think it's important to recognize, as we look at this budget, in this particular budget year, that it's not going to be an easy year financially for people across this municipality. Inflation is now driving up interest rates, which is going to make home ownership more expensive. Interest rates are going to continue to climb over the course of the year. And the price of consumer goods is going to climb and continue to climb because the most major input to those goods, labor, and the cost of labor is going to climb dramatically this year. So it's going to be a difficult year on households across the town of Saugeen Shores and across households across Ontario and beyond. And so I think that for the dollars that we're going to ask for from the ratepayers, we should make sure that we are doing something productive with those dollars on day one. And so I am 99% happy with the budget, but there's one thing about the report that I don't like, and it may not come as a surprise to some of you. I don't like the concept of dumping large amounts of taxpayer dollars in a huge reserve in this year and for us to sit on it and hold it in abeyance until we do something with it. So my suggestion is that we should put all of that money against debt that we have already decided to incur in the year 2018. We have a project already, the Beach House, which was intended to be debt financed, and also one that's next on the agenda, which will, I hope will pass, but will incur debt financing. But there's other debt financing that's coming up and out there. And so my suggestion, Mr. Mayor, would be that we give staff direction to apply that $725,000 against debt, and that we do it immediately, and that we defray debt on projects we've already decided to go ahead on, and if there's surplus money on projects which we are about to or may decide on in the coming minutes or months. So I would, I guess, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like that in the form of a motion, I can make that a motion, but I would like to give that direction or have council consider it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further comments? I don't disagree with you. Look, I think we have lots of if we get past this first step, that we have no trouble doing that. I think the step tonight is, if we approve this budget, about how we there's a couple items in here I think that the staff recommended was a long-term financing plan, which would include those issues. So I don't think there's any. I'd be apprehensive to say that now and complicate it. I think if we pass the budget now, and then we can have that discussion about that in the very near future, and we can accomplish the same thing without complicating it tonight. Sure.
Question, Mr. Mayor, in the resolution this evening, are we directing or giving direction to create the reserve fund though? Like, are we just, will that be revisited in some way? To me, Mr. Mayor, I guess that if we're going to collect the money as part of the budget, we should describe how we want to expend the money. I don't know if maybe you're right, Mr. Mayor, and I'm overcomplicating it, but I guess maybe some direction from staff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and I think Dave's going to speak, but I think that the budget is pretty clear about help to alleviate debt financing, or the recommendation, and that's included in the second part of it. If you want to go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I was going to point that out as well, is right in the resolution. Staff are very cognizant of council's desire to avoid, if possible, or minimize debt financing. I would suggest, if it's appropriate for council, to pass the budget report as written tonight, if there is support, and quite frankly, at our next meeting, we can take those numbers and make a recommendation to staff on how we can apply that money to eliminate or reduce the debt for the projects you've already approved, the Beach House being the most significant, and certainly we could do that at our next meeting.
Right. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that's fine. What I don't want to see happen, just so I'm very clear, is for us to build a reserve and take out the debt. To take out new debt and be holding onto a bunch of cash. So I think as long as we can have a discussion about that, and this council can decide that we're not going to do that, which would be my preference, that's fine with me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions? Just a comment. I certainly absolutely agree with you of designating it for a specific purpose. I do like the idea of building the capacity, and we've got $250 million in tangible capital assets that I know we have been underfunding to keep them up to the infrastructure deficit. So I think there's an opportunity here to start to address that issue where we're not the only municipality in the province, where AMO will tell us that municipalities are underfunded in maintaining the infrastructure that we currently have, and we're no different than anybody else. So I think we're on the right track. Whether we'll get there sooner than later, we'll see. In any case, any further questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is a staff report, and it has to do with the purchase of land at 300 Concession 6 And our clerk, Linda White, is going to present the report.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The background to the report is that HSC Aggregates Limited is the owner of the property located at 300 Concession Road 6. The owner has indicated their interest through an offer to purchase and sale agreement to sell this 63 hectare parcel of land to the town of Saugeen Shores. As mentioned, this property is located on the 6th concession, which is the southeast end of Port Elgin. It's an irregular shape parcel with over 1,000 meters of frontage on concession 6. The subject property is currently a depleted gravel pit with some stockpile remaining. The remainder of the land is farmland. The property is zoned planned development, environmental protection, and extractive industrial. Municipal water and hydro are available at the road. Municipal sanitary sewer will need to be designed to service the subject property. The town's recreation master plan identified the need for a sports complex within the town of Saugeen Shores. This subject property, the location of it is appropriate for a sports field complex in our opinion, and is of a sufficient size to accommodate a sports field complex and a future employment lands. This report is recommending the purchase of the subject land. There is an offer to purchase and sale agreement that has been presented by the owner. The details of the conditions are included in your report, which outline that the purchase price is $1.5 million. The town has received an independent appraisal of the property, which supports the asking price. The proposed closing date of this transaction is March 16, 2018. Some of the highlights of the condition is that Harold Sutherland Construction, who is the operator of the gravel pit, is offering to make a donation to the town in the amount of $250,000. HSC is responsible for the rehabilitation of the pit under the Agri Resources Act, and will work with the town and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to obtain the revised site plan and rehabilitation plan. The goal of this is to request a change to the final rehabilitation from an agriculture use to a recreational end use. The rehabilitation of the pit is estimated to be completed by the end of 2018, earlier in the years anticipated. The conditions outline that there are approximately 30,000 to 40,000 tons of granular A material that will be left on site for the town's use. The estimated value of this granular A is approximately $200,000. There's also an existing stockpile of granular B that's located outside of the license boundary, which will be left on site, and the estimated value of this granular B is approximately $200,000. The owner and the town of Saugeen Shores will enter into a landowner license agreement with the pit operator, which will require the pit operator to complete the rehabilitation of the pit. And this agreement will remain in effect until such time as the lands have been fully rehabilitated to the M&R approval. Once the sale is finalized, staff will work with an overall site plan and will require additional resources. I guess it's worth mentioning that the 2018 budget includes $40,000 to conceptually design the sports field component. The financial impact is there for your consideration. It does recommend using a parkland reserve fund, development charges, donation, and either debt financing or reserves, as we've just heard, to finance this project.
Thank you, Linda. Then the recommendation is that council pass a bylaw to authorize the purchase of 300 Concession 6, being part lot 10 to part lot 12, Concession 7, and part lot 11, Concession 7. Comments? Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I think this is a fantastic opportunity for the town. It is going to provide a lot of much-needed recreational and industrial space that we desperately need. And as I've been talking about for the last 3.5 years, we do need some recreational upgrades as our town is about to grow. And it provides opportunities that will take us to the next 10 years and beyond. So I fully support this.
Councillor Dave Mayap.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and once again through you, I too wholeheartedly support this recommendation. This is an opportunity that does not come around very often, to have a piece of land like this so close to our town that offers so much potential is rare, and if we were to miss out on this opportunity, we would not be doing any favors to the people of this town. I also would like to commend the vision of Harold Sutherland and his organization for having the vision to make this available, and their generous donation and certainly the generous terms that they've offered for us to make this possible. The picture that you can see for those who are looking at the agenda, there's a aerial photograph that shows the property, and it's a very unique property indeed, and it borders along the creek, and there's actually about plus or minus 50 acres, which is currently in agricultural use, rented to a neighboring agricultural producer, and that is no doubt something that can be continued. So there's an income to be generated off of this property through a rental agreement, which I'm certain that that person is eager to continue. And not only that, from the funding point of view, if we do end up developing this into, and that's the intention, is to develop it into a multi-use recreational facility, including baseball diamonds and perhaps soccer fields, it will make some of our current facilities available for redevelopment. The couple that come to mind certainly are the ones at Lakeview at the tourist camp. That is a valuable piece of land in the middle of town, which we could harness and take advantage of for future development, be it through expansion of the trailer facility or the camping facilities, or another redevelopment. But that's a wholly developable and valuable piece of property. And there are others that we may be able to reconsider. So to miss on this it would be a remiss, and I'm looking forward to an exciting time seeing this develop. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that there's two comments in the report that speak to the fact that this is of a sufficient size to accommodate a sport field complex and future employment lands. I don't believe decisions have necessarily been made about the use of the entire property, so that's a discussion that could lead to some really interesting prospects for the community. So that's pretty open-ended there. I also wanted to comment on the last line of the report, which says that the 2018 budget includes $40,000 to conceptually design the sport field component. I would ask that we also consider moving a little more quickly on coming up with a concept idea for the natural area that's there that abuts and is adjacent to the creek. I think that that is a signature park just waiting for something magical to happen, and certainly I would like to have that idea out in the community as soon as we can get it out there, because I think as soon as the sports field component starts to happen, people will have access to the site, and it would be great if they had access to the natural area, because there aren't a lot of those kinds of areas available in close proximity to the urban setting in either community, Southampton or Port Elgin, but it's a signature park just waiting for us to have access. So that's not specifically in there, and it seems to focus on the sport field component. I guess what I'm saying is that it's a sufficient size that it's going to have lots of potential, and I just would hope that within, should the report pass within the time frame up until the end of the year, that there could be some bigger discussions about the potential for the land that could excite more than just the sports field people, because I think there's great potential to excite the whole community in lots of different ways. Thank you.
Councilor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will echo the same thinking, and I'm obviously we discussed this, and it's an exciting opportunity, no doubt. And I would just want to be sure that if we purchase the land, that our hands are not tied beyond. I mean, I think that it's fair game to say that the sports field complex was a priority concern. But there are other opportunities, and there will always be other opportunities, and we never know who may be knocking at the door saying, could we use this land for something else? Is this agreement sufficiently worded, and will it be sufficiently worded, that we're not tying our hands to only the sports field component?
I think you can say with a whole lot of certainty, yes. There should be lots of flexibility. There'll be a land use planning issue if we need to change the zoning on it, but that's Okay. Oh, sorry. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to staff for having done the work on this and brought it to this point, and also just echo what Dave said, because it's really the big news story as far as I'm concerned, this $250,000 donation from Harold Sutherland. I mean, that's what a huge donation to the municipality and the people of the municipality, and they deserve our extreme gratitude for that. Two comments. One is, it will sound redundant, but I think that this project can be done without debt financing and ought to be done without debt financing. And I'd like to challenge staff to return to us to move this project forward that way. And also on the element of employment lands, or in that end of it, the sports field complex obviously is something we need, and it's great to see that moving forward. But this is a huge opportunity for us to move forward on supporting the major component replacement project at Bruce Power, and the kind of needs that those nuclear suppliers have and want to. They want to build in our community. They want to do things in our community, and this is an opportunity for us to allow them to do that. So I hope that we'll be hearing quickly from the administration about how we permit that on these, how we arrange to make that a possibility, a reality. I anticipate that the people who are looking at making those investments in our community would like us to have had a plan yesterday, and so I'm sure they would like us to move quickly, and I'm sure you all have been thinking about it a great deal. So hopefully we're going to hear some things about that. And I guess I would say too that I for one am supportive if resources are required to make that possible. I certainly would be one vote in favor of providing those resources to move that ball forward, because it's a pretty important thing, I think. But this is a great news story, and thank you to all who have brought it to this point, and certainly has my support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'm not going to say much more. I think it's really kind of interesting how this whole opportunity unfolded, and I really, again, I'll commend staff for getting us to this point, because I know there was some negotiations and some wondering about how we would use this land, and I think we're coming to a great opportunity here. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda is a staff report, and it has to do with this surplus land of part lot 50 Lake Range, the sale of it, and Clerk Linda White's going to present.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The town owns a property located south of the 10th concession and east of the service road leading into the independent grocery store. The parcel is approximately 30 meters by 170 meters length and is zoned planned development. The property located immediately west of this property that I'm referring to is owned by a numbered company. This property is located right on Highway 21 north of the Independent Gas Bar and used to be known as the former Bricker property. So the owner of the former Bricker property, if I can refer to it as that, has requested the town to consider selling the town-owned property for the purpose of allowing him to enlarge his existing lot and develop the entire larger parcel as a commercial industrial mixed use. Typically, the municipality would offer the land for sale to the public. However, due to the servicing advantages, and I've somewhat outlined them in the report, staff are recommending consideration be given to negotiating the sale of the subject land to the adjacent landowner as opposed to the general public. This sale will also provide for a consolidated, so a better development, as well as a more timely development of the planned development parcel. At this time, staff are seeking permission to continue with negotiations with the adjacent landowner, and there are still a number of steps in the process that will need to be completed. If Council accepts tonight's recommendation, we will move forward with discussions and will report back at future meetings to seek Council's final approval to declare the land surplus and to authorize an offer to purchase and sale agreement. The value of the land will be determined by an independent property appraiser, and upon completion of the land transfer, the purchaser will be required to submit a site plan and a site-specific zoning amendment for Council's consideration.
Thank you, Linda. We'll start here. Councillor Dave Mayap.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I will be supporting this recommendation. My one question is, how did the town originally become the owners of this strip of land along the backside of the former Bricker property. It's unclear to me this time.
I think that there was that part, which also includes the stormwater management facility, was given to the town from a former developer. And I don't know under what circumstances it was, I forget now. But it was part of a development on that whole parcel of land that we ended up in. I think that's pretty accurate, isn't it?
That is accurate. I answered the same question in advance of the meeting, pretty much the same, so we have the same recollection.
Given to the town for some of the things that to facilitate some of that development. Okay, Vice Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps this is a question through you to Linda, to the clerk. It's not clear from the mapping. When you talk about the adjacent landowner, there is a second property right at the corner. Is the land that's immediately to the west of that, is it being offered for sale to that landowner, or is the entire swath to the landowner, to the property to the south? Because wouldn't it be typical to offer it to adjacent landowners?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. That is a correct observation. There is a part at the most northerly point that backs onto what I refer to as the church property. At this point in time, at the time of writing this report, municipal staff were looking at whether we actually needed any of this land for municipal purposes, any other utilities that are going there. That review will still be ongoing. At this point, to answer your question, we haven't determined whether that part was surplus at the time of writing this report, and it has not been, a discussion has not taken place with respect to the church property.
Any further questions? What we've done in the past, and I'm sure this will come up later in the process, that when we do sell land like this to a developer, that it isn't, he doesn't have the opportunity to speculate on it and turn it around and sell it, that he needs to develop it in a certain time period or sell it back to the town at I think in our business park, I think our options there were 80, I forget, whatever it was. But I mean, I'm not suggesting that this developer is ever going to do that, but I mean, that's typically what we have done with property with the town to ensure that it gets developed. And I think, this piece really kind of makes sense to end up with that piece of property. It's really not something that the town, I don't think in the long term is going to need. So any further questions? All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That's carried. Off. So the next item on the agenda is a community planning and development staff report, and it has to do with our community improvement plan, and our development coordinator, Jay Posner, is going to present the report.
Yes, thank you. And as you recently heard, we have seen the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and I'm excited that I get to ask Council to begin the process of implementing one of its key recommendations, which is to use the Community Improvement Plan tools under the Planning Act to develop and focus our economic development activity in attracting the key, as I say here, target sector businesses, affordable housing, hotels, and manufacturing. And so we've looked at other CIPs throughout Ontario, and the best ones in our review are focused, flexible, and are fiscally responsible. So we're also asking, as part of the ask, to get the advice from our friends at Hempson Consulting to ensure the CIP and its programs can be implemented in a fiscally responsible manner. If Council directs staff to proceed on this recommendation, we'll start a process very similar to an official plan amendment. We'll hold an open house, seek input from the public, landowners, and other stakeholders in the community, prepare a final document for council's consideration and then a bylaw for passage.
Thank you, Jay. So the recommendation is that council direct staff to prepare a community improvement plan consistent with the recommendation of the Saugeen Shores Economic Development Strategic Plan. Comments? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the development coordinator for the report. One of the, it's a great idea, and it's wonderful to bring in some outside expertise and to have done some research already just to enhance what we already have. One of the problems that we've had, though, with the existing CIPs is we haven't funded any activity beyond creating the thing. So on your report, you've got next steps. When it gets down to implementation, let's assume that this happens over the next few months, as I think you're implying. Do you see a request coming back to council during 2018 for some additional funds to sort of see this through, or is this something that would be set up for the next budget cycle? Because that's one of the challenges. We've never actually funded our CIP activities, and I would hope that maybe this time that we'll have a chance at getting through to that stage too.
Well, there's still a flexible application that's through the framework can allow council to be as conservative or as aggressive as it wants to be through the CIP. But I do expect that the sooner the better in terms of implementing the Economic Development Strategic Plan, as well as attracting the economic activity that we expect and we anticipate is coming very shortly. So if not through, maybe I can offer an interim update, provide some of the comments from Hempson Consulting about what it might take, and can, subject to management's review, provide that to council as well, so you can make a decision.
Councilor Minaj.
Sometimes I wonder if there's these hidden pieces that are bigger than they appear to be, and we're saying we're going to have like an official plan amendment, have an opportunity to speak to the public about this, but this affordable housing one is surfacing repeatedly, and I wonder if there's an opportunity, Mr. Mayor, to ask staff, in particular Jay, to look at it and maybe pull it out and say, let's put a brainstorm, a think tank of all those people that are knowledgeable about the affordable housing issue, and let's pull it out of this and not roll it into this, because I'm afraid it needs more attention than being part of this. I'd like to see it separated and have its own special day of discussion, as opposed to rolled into a package with others.
I can tell you, Neil, that housing is a mandate of the county, and they have done a lot of very extensive work along what you've talked about with developers, with real estate. Did you want to speak to it? With real estate agents, you see the NIMBY team now that goes to planning meetings and actively promotes applications for, defends them. So, they've done a lot of work already under this. I don't think we need to redo that work. I think if you want to, reach out to the county housing department as part of that, they do have a 10-year strategy for providing housing in the county, and with some targets that they are meeting pretty consistently. So I think that's probably a better way than, I don't think we need to be both doing the same thing here at the county and at Saugeen Shores, because there's a lot of expertise at the county and a lot of work has already been done. So, sure.
Absolutely understand the county's role and the leadership role. What I'm thinking, though, is that the pressure is on us now. It may be on other communities. I don't live in those other communities. I'm not following along all of their discussions. But I feel there's a strong pressure here, and the county can lead us right here in our community, and I'd like to see us pull that out and talk about it with business leaders, with construction leaders, with whomever, and see if we can't get a Made in Saugeen Shores partnership opportunity with the county, and see if we can't do something faster, bigger, better than is currently being envisioned.
The CEO would like to comment.
Thank you very much for the comment and the observation. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I make a couple of comments. One is that the CIP will be one tool in solving lots of issues. It's not done in isolation. You will remember that the economic development strategy was presented to Council. It has now and is going back to the Economic Development Advisory Committee, who are going to prioritize efforts, and we will be reporting back to Council on proposed strategies. So if you look at one of these other items that are listed as an example, the nuclear support services, lots of effort is going on over and beyond the CIP. So again, I would just say it's one part of the solution. The Economic Development Advisory Committee is now working on prioritizing all of the recommendations, and will be bringing it back to Council for direction and acceptance. And if affordable housing is something that Dev rises to the top in Council, then we'll certainly put more resources behind it.
I think it's worth noting that the federal government did talk about committing several $1 billion to affordable housing beginning, I think they said, in 2019 or 2020. So I think it's apt that we have look at this idea and be ready to take advantage of that. But again, I think we need to work closely with the county. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. And thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the one thing I would add, though, the CAO says it's one tool, and it is one tool, but it's a really great tool in that it lets us incentivize the private sector to do some of this work and take some of the burden off the shoulders of the county and the federal government and the taxpayer to do this work. I mean, we can have more effect, I think, in a lot of ways if we get out and I think the Vice Deputy Mayor made a good point, but where we should, what the whole point of these is to, in my view at least, to entice private interests to do things that we would like them, that the people would like them to do, and we haven't funded some of those in the past, but there's some opportunities coming up where we may be able to fund some of those things, and so this is a great opportunity to do that, to make that money go further, and get the private sector on board to do some of this work for us. So I mean, I think this is a really great idea. I think CIPs are a really great tool under the Planning Act to do lots of interesting things, and we've been talking about some of these things already in terms of not just on affordable housing, but incentivizing all sorts of private interest to develop all sorts of different types of facilities that we require to support, once again, the nuclear industry or other industries coming to town. And this is a great way to package that, structure it, have it make sense, have it be fair, and so I'm really excited to see it move forward. I thank staff for bringing it forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any further comments? All in favor of the recommendation? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda then is, let me go back to it here, is a Community Services Parks and Recreation report. It has a staff report that has to do with the YMCA and the town of Saugeen Shores, and the Director of Community Services, Jane, will present.
Thank you. This council previously supported staff in seeking active partnerships for a new pool build in Saugeen Shores, and this evening we're looking for approval to enter into conversations with the YMCA of Owen Sound. We'd like to discuss possible partnerships in providing an aquatic facility. This process will provide a healthy discussion and will include some of the continued high participation rates from a broad spectrum of the population. It will also include financial viability and reducing the dependence of tax support from residents, as well as accessibility for all and regardless of financial circumstance. The agreement will allow for maintaining and trusting a relationship within the community. If approved this evening, staff will present back to Council a draft MOU and potential next steps. And at this point, there's no financial impact.
Thank you, Jane. So the recommendation is that Council endorse staff's recommendation to work with the YMCA of Owen Sound Grey Bruce to develop a fulsome memorandum of understanding to guide a potential partnership between the two organizations. Questions or comments? All. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, I know we're going to have some speeches.
He's getting anxious. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things, I guess. I support this and support moving forward because it's a good idea. And the only thing that I'm concerned about, something I've heard about with regard to YMCA agreements, is this question of fitness centers and the fact that fitness centers are sort of an integral part of YMCA operations. And I know that we have a number of successful fitness centers in the town of Saugeen Shores, ones that contribute a great deal to this municipality. And I want to put on the table right now that I'm uncomfortable at this moment with the concept of us subsidizing to the extent of many possibly tens of millions of dollars facilities for competition to set up in those and then go into direct competition with these businesses in our community, which have been great supporters of our community. I'm not suggesting it's a drop dead thing for me at this moment, but it's a concern that I have and one that I'd like to see addressed as part of the ongoing discussions that you're going to be having with the YMCA. And when you return, I'd like to hear something about that and how it's going to be addressed, how that concern can be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate your feedback on that. And it is certainly preliminary. At this point, we're merely asking for approval to enter into those conversations with the
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would echo the same comment. I had it as one of the list of mine here is that for years our recreation departments have said what the private sector can do, we don't need to do. And to a point, I understand the point where club initiation fees and so on price things to the point where some members of the public can't afford it. So some method of involving not only the partnership with the YMCA, but a partnership discussion, at least a discussion with our other business partners in the community that are providing for these kinds of opportunities to date. Another issue that I would be concerned with is that there's been no question over the years I've sat on council and before that we've endorsed and we've said how great our staff working in our pool community, how well they do, how well our life-saving programs are, all of those things. So I hope all of those discussions that enter into a partnership include retention of staff wherever possible, and that I don't want to handcuff the discussion either, but I think that it's an important notation that we've got great staff, and we've always said that, and so if we believe it, then it should be some sort of part of our discussion with the YMCA. The other thing that comes to mind is that we have that plan. So we have the plan, and I believe it had a couple of parts. It had, a very improved looking opportunity for a new pool, including a walking track, which I think the whole community would like to see. So I'm hoping those elements that we saw in our previous plans are carried through to the discussion. And finally, if in fact this does come to fruition and we end up with a new pool built at this location, which I also hope is part of the discussion, and that the old pool and future programming space or future opportunities for that space enters into some kind of, we don't lose sight of it, we don't lose it, we don't drop the loose end, that I'd like to know what's going to happen to the old pool space, and I think it's important to the community to know what that could be, and I've heard Jane speak in the past of additional programming opportunities for additional gymnasium space, that the Board of Education might even be looking for an expansion as that school will continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I both agree with the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Menage and disagree at some points. We've talked for 3.5 years about the pool. It's time to move on, so let's get this going. I look forward to seeing what the partnership agreement we can come up with. I'd like to support it with that, but however, I'm also of the opposite opinion that this is not the place for the pool. We need to look at the alternatives as Council has asked and directed last April, that we look at alternative places, and with this new outdoor land purchase, that opens up a couple of other opportunities now. Does Cameron Park come into play now that we don't have to worry about a ball diamond there? Can we keep it up closer to the school? So with those in mind, I kind of need to know before I ask my next question, are we set in stone at the Plex? Because we've kind of got stuck in questions before where we wanted to move it forward and we said yes to one thing, but then we get entangled with two other different ideas that come along. Are we looking at alternative sites still, or are we set here?
Yes,
certainly. I think you will recall the last time we presented to council when we had 3 guest speakers here, is one of the concepts is as we enter into potential partnerships, some of those partnerships may dictate where the facility may end up. So we're certainly at this point not pigeonholing ourselves into a specific location. Locations will be derived as we go through those conversations with future partnerships.
That's all well and good, but council at the end has the ultimate decision on where it goes. And as we did have those different discussions, things have changed at that time. So I just want to make it known and on record that if it's here, that I will not support the motion, but I do believe that we have to look at the alternatives. Also, if we're going to be going forward at this point, I think we might as well get the public involved, as the Deputy Mayor would say, we've got to put our money where our mouth is, and we should be starting a fundraising committee right now. If we're going to be looking at this, let's get the money out there, let's get it started, and when we're ready to go, we have something tangible to put down.
I think the CEO would like to comment.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Director of Community Services and I have had some discussions with representatives of the Y. It is a thoughtful, considerate, consultative process. One of the challenges is fundraising, and their advice, because they do this all over the country, is don't jump too quickly. You have to get your expectations right. Fundraising is very, very important, as is site selection. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but we will make sure that the community is consulted and council as well. But probably her second biggest piece of advice was be very thoughtful on fundraising.
Okay, so Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with some of the comments that Councillor Matheson has made, and I appreciate what you just said. I think it's a little premature to jump into fundraising when there's still a lot of balls up in the air. And one of those balls is, we've said right from the very beginning that a project that has grown to the millions and millions and millions of dollars, it really doesn't stand a chance of being successful in the bigger picture way without the support of some funding from other levels of government. So, that's a part of the puzzle too, that, who knows? So I agree that, we should engage in the conversation with the Y, and almost from the beginning of the conversation, we talked about partnerships, and I guess it's about time we had some legitimate conversations. So I'm all in favor of that. There's still an awful lot, though, to be discussed about a pool, and location is one thing, but the funding of the thing is, we're not agreeing tonight that should there be a good discussion and a partnership agreement signed that this is it's a done deal. There's still all kinds of funding conversation that I assume is going to happen, because we've said from the beginning that we need help. And we need help from a partner, we need help from a fundraising campaign, but we need help from other levels of government as well. Thank you.
Okay. No further this is just one small step in this process leading us forward. And it's a very important one. I think it's a very important one. So I think we had lots of good discussion about what might or might not come, but I think this is one good small step to move it forward. And I'm sure that staff will lead us to a good memorandum of understanding with the Y. So, all in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That's carried. So, back to the agenda then. The next item, there are, 9 items for committee's information there, under minutes. Councillor Minaj.
I didn't know whether you wanted to go through them one at a time and ask for questions, or I would like to jump right down to 6, but I could wait my turn.
Go ahead.
So the minutes of the Accessibility Committee has new business 7.1, the A&W site plan on Goddard Street. And there's a list there, I haven't added them up, it has to be over 20, of the comments that they're making for site plan control. And I guess my point is that I read them one at a time and I think, you know what, that's pretty good, that makes sense, ooh, that one's tough, really? And I go through the list and I'm not sure anymore, and I wonder if I'm missing something, if I need a new council or training session on what the Accessibility Committee is expecting me to understand and deliberate on when it comes to site plan control acceptance, what their role is in dictating terms under site plan control. So I would like to be educated more about some of these painting curbs and speed bumps and maybe putting heating into sidewalks. I get it, but I don't know where it's coming from. Other than, is this a very active committee, or is this a legislative document that I should be reading? So I would like some help, some future help, and before we do get into the site plan control discussions on new properties in the community, as to how many of these are mandated, legislated, or are wishful. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can. These are really, I think, the recommendation, and this committee and council will approve the site plan. These are just recommendations at this point. Any further questions on Deputy Mayor Charbonneau?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On a different point, with regard to the first item, the Ombudsman's letter, I just a couple things on that. First thing to note, I think it's important to note, the first line in that letter says they're writing to further the conversation that I assume they had with yourself and Chief Administrative Officer on January 17th. But this is the first communication we've had on this subject, formal communication back since you, Mr. Mayor, wrote your letter of November 8th, 2016, formally complaining or issuing a complaint to the Ombudsman's office. So, we've been 15 months waiting for this response from the Ombudsman's office, and I think I just have to register my disappointment in the Ombudsman's comments here, really just a reiteration of things we already knew. And it's really like the gist of this situation, at least from what I glean from what the Ombudsman says here, is that they enumerate it pretty clearly that the ministry can't approve the ministry can't prove, that a turbine is non-compliant without an audit, and they can't demand an audit until they prove the turbine is non-compliant. So they've constructed, like the ministry or somebody, the legislature, I guess, has constructed a catch-22 in the regulation that has made it impossible for communities to get redress, which should be pretty obvious, I guess, at this point, since it's been 5 years without an audit or a completed audit. Hopefully we have one about to be completed. But and what's disappointing is that the Ombudsman of Ontario finds no problem with that. That there's no issue there. Well, that's no problem. It was a catch-22 in the legislation, and you can't get redress, and it goes on and on and on. And they enumerate year after year after year of delay for all sorts of different reasons, and no problem. That's all fine, according to the Ombudsman of Ontario. So I guess my point is that I find that to be a fairly disappointing response from the Ombudsman, and I'm not certain what purpose the Ombudsman serves, if not to address just issues just like that. So maybe they can answer for me at some point. They can tell me why they exist. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dave Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, I just, for the sake of being on record, and I'd like to echo the comments of the Deputy Mayor. That letter I read, and I read it over again, and I read it from the bottom up, and any way you look at it, it's just another episode in a long series of bureaucratic shuffling the dice, or shuffling the cards, and nothing's coming out. Nothing's being done. It's just been passed over and passed over and passed over, and it's clear to me that the entire bureaucracy from the Premier on down is somewhat hesitant or refuses to address the situation of noise from this windmill or any other windmill in the province. And if those listening stick around for the regular council tonight, we have a motion that hopes to bring some more clarity and another step in the long journey to get some attention to this situation, which is causing a lot of people suffering, as we heard tonight in the delegations. Thank you.
The comment. I think the ombudsman, really, when we reached out to the ombudsman, that's really, I think it's pretty clear where the issue is here, and it's with the Ministry of Environment and the Minister and the government. They very clearly support green energy, and we're asking, I think, something of the ombudsman that you're not likely to going to get. They don't write the legislation; they interpret it, and it's frustrating. I know we've tried many things. I know we've met with the minister 2 or 3 times, but you'll get an opportunity to express your what you think of the Green Energy Act later this year, and I suspect that's the way you're going to have to deal with it. In any case, if there's nothing else on these, I will move on to, we have 2 more items on the agenda. One is down here, information report for services in kind for special events, and I know our Director of Public Works is here if anybody has any questions on this. The other one is information report on the history of the Park Reserve, and our Director of Community Services is here if any questions. No questions, and that's the end of our agenda. We'll take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Madison, Councillor Rich, all in favor. We'll adjourn for 10 minutes.